Hello, class. This is Mr. Kingsbury from your Algebra 2 class. Today we're talking about quadratics. Our topic of discussion will specifically be the discriminant. And our essential question actually has three parts. First of all, what is the discriminant? Secondly, why is it important? And thirdly, how do I calculate it? Excellent questions, all of them. Let me see if I can show you what all this is about. So for starters, the discriminant is actually related to something else you know about called the quadratic equation, or the quadratic formula, I should say. The quadratic formula. The quadratic formula uses, well, the quadratic formula looks like this. X equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That is the quadratic formula. And actually, these a's, b's, and c's come from the standard form of a quadratic, which looks like this. Y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So these letters go in here. The quadratic formula can then be used to find solutions to any equation with specific a, b, and c values. Now, it was discovered as people were, this was derived, and then it was discovered that this part of it right here was particularly helpful. And so we called this, it was given the name, the discriminant. Hope I spelled that right. Yep. So what does it do? Why is it important? That's a great question. In fact, let's write this down. The discriminant. And I'm going to go ahead and write. It is b squared minus 4ac. What does it do? It tells us how many solutions a quadratic equation has and what type they are. Or how about instead of saying and what type they are, we'll say and whether they are real or complex. See, what happens is when you plug the values in under here, you either get a positive number, which you can totally square root. You get 0, which is neither positive nor negative, but you can still square root. Or you get a negative number, which you can take the square root of, but you have to be a little sneaky about it, and it gives you an I, which I talked about in a different video, complex number video. And by knowing this number, then you know what's going to happen. You know if there's going to be two solutions or one solution, and if they're going to be complex or if they're going to be real. If you have either a 0 or a positive number in here, they will be real solutions. And of course, if you have the negative one, then it's going to be complex because you're taking the square root of a negative number. That always leads to a complex solution. So generally speaking, here's the breakdown. Positive answer means you have two real solutions. A negative answer means you have two complex solutions. That means there will be a real part and an imaginary part. And then if you have a 0, that means there will be one solution, but it will be a real solution. And the reason for that is the square root of 0 is 0. And remember, you're both adding and subtracting whatever this is from negative b or opposite of b. And whether you add 0 to something or subtract 0 from it, it changes nothing. That's why it's called the additive identity. Anyway, so that answers the first question. What is the discriminant? Got it. B squared minus 4ac, part of this quadratic equation. Why is it important? Because it tells us how many solutions we're going to have and what kind they are. Now, how do I calculate it? I thought you would never ask. Let me do 3 examples for you. I'm going to do an example of each of these. Okay? So let's start with the simple and work to the sublime. So let's say that I give you 6x squared minus 2x minus 3. Actually, I should say y equals all of that business. Let's do that. And I want to know what's the value of the discriminant. Well, in order to find that, I need to know what a, b, and c are. Now, a is going to be the coefficient of x squared. It's not this whole thing. It's just the number part. It's just 6. When I ask you what's the a value, you don't tell me 6x squared. You tell me just 6. What is the b value? Similarly, that's going to be the coefficient of x. In this case, it's negative 2. And then c is the constant by itself, which is negative 3. So I need to know what those are. And when we do the quadratic formula, that'll come into play. Next, I'm going to plug into this. B squared minus 4ac. So b is negative 2. And I will square that. Minus 4 times a is 6. And times c is negative 3. And I can actually just type that in the calculator straight up without any fuss or muss. So let's do that. Here's my calculator. I'm just going to type this straight up, or straight in. Negative 2 squared minus 4 times 6 times negative 3. Now, before I hit enter, I want to point out something. My b value is negative. Please note that I put it inside of parentheses and I put the square on the outside of the parentheses. The calculator is very specific and it will follow PEMDAS to the letter. So if you don't put the parentheses and you just have negative 2 squared, what it will do is square the 2 part but not the negative part, and then it will multiply by negative 1, or it'll put a negative on it. It looks at this as negative 1 times 2. And then, then we're squaring it. So it won't be handled correctly if you don't put parentheses around it. And I think that's just a good habit to get into anyway. So we get that, and we get 76. Now, how many solutions is that? That's a positive value. That means 2 real solutions. Pretty awesome. Let's do another example. Example 2. Let's do, instead, how about y equals negative 2x squared minus x minus 1. Again, what are my a, b, and c? Well, a is going to be negative 2. B will be, look at this. A lot of people go, what is that? They want to say it's 0 because there's nothing there, but that's not the case. If it was 0, that would get rid of the whole term. This is just negative 1. And then my c value is also negative 1. And once again, I will plug into b squared minus 4ac. So b is negative 1, so I have negative 1 squared minus 4 times a is negative 2, times c is negative 1. So I have negative 1 squared minus 4 times negative 2 times negative 1. And again, I can plug that right in the calculator. Negative 1 squared minus 4 times negative 2 times negative 1. And I get negative 7. So that is a negative answer. That means there are 2 complex solutions. And when we solve stuff using the quadratic formula, which will be a much longer video, I will talk about what that means. It's good to know this because how we end up handling the quadratic formula changes a little, whether we're dealing with real solutions or complex solutions. I've got one more example, and I'm going to try and squeeze it in here. I think I have enough space. We're going to try. Last example. Let's go y equals 9x squared plus 6x plus 1. And once again, I need to know what is A, B, and C. A, B, and C, or what are A, B, and C, excuse me. A would be 9, B would be 6, and C would be 1. And then I will plug into B squared minus 4AC. B is 6, so I have 6 squared minus 4 times A is 9, times C is 1. And if I plug this in the calculator, we have 6 squared minus 4 times 9 times 1. And I get 0. So I have a 0 solution. That means 1 real solution. And that is the discriminant. I will show you how that works, or how that fits into our quadratic formula solving stuff later in a later video. No big deal. And hopefully it will make a lot more sense. Anyway, I'll see you in class.